Episode 168 of the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Welcome back. My name is Jeremy. I'll be hosting today's intro to the conversation. So today we've got two brand new voices to the podcast that we're looking forward to hearing from. We'll have Brittany doing the interviewing. Brittany was on our team over the course of the summer of 2022. She was a summer student with us and did a great job working on this particular topic and project, helping students think about vocation differently. And just on the inside scoop here around the youth worker community, we're continuing to process this and try to figure out if there's a better way for us to even resource and equip youth workers across our country of Canada and beyond, as we're recognizing that there are such big gaps in the conversation around vocation for teenagers in particular. So consider this the start of a conversation, and certainly we would love to talk more. So I always put my contact info in the show notes. You can certainly reach out to me if you'd like to dig in a little bit more, or if you've got some resources that you want to offer into the conversation. But what happened here is that Brittany got a chance to interview Gustavo, and Gustavo Santos is doing his PhD on this topic. And so they have a long conversation about walking students through thinking about vocation and trying to perhaps shift and change even our understanding of how to have these conversations. And as a volunteer youth worker, you should know that you have enormous influence over this conversation, which is why we're bringing it to you. And this doesn't necessarily land at like some particular, like, here's the 3 best steps, or here's the 3 things we want you to say. But we want you to be thinking about this thoughtfully, because even when you have students in grades 6 and 7, you naturally end up in places where you're talking about students' giftings, their callings, the things that maybe fire them up or get them excited. As Gustavo says, even asking the question, what captures your imagination right now? And for you as a volunteer youth worker, you can help students understand how maybe God has gifted them and for a purpose, for his purposes, and why that might lead them into particular areas into their future. And you can help that conversation along. On top of that, and they'll reference this, we also know we just have a huge need for more workers in church ministry. And so certainly we want to spark that as being an option for students as well. It is a vocation. There's lots of job openings. Even to this day, gosh, there are so many openings in churches across Canada and the US and beyond. We know that. And so we want students to think that that can actually be something, if they feel called to it, that they can go into. Lastly, I do want to say that at the time of this recording and as we launch this podcast, have been wrapping up a big tour across our country of Canada, training volunteers, and we've got partners throughout our whole year of conference season. And so when you think about vocation with students, one of the great things is that there are a number of institutions that are thinking about this from a post-secondary perspective. And so just want to make sure that you know, if you didn't realize, in our country of Canada, we've got enormously helpful schools that can help process with your students, especially in their grade 11 and 12 years. And so we'll link our 3 partners in the show notes, but they are Briarcrest College and Seminary in Saskatchewan, a wonderful school training students to think Christianly and to process even vocational broadly. But that's also the school that I went to, and got a chance to prepare myself for ministry at Briarcrest College and Seminary. Rocky Mountain College, a very fun spot. We've been partnering with them for a while, but they have a number of options online. And so the accessibility of Rocky Mountain College is absolutely incredible. Again, even for volunteer youth workers, we've had a number that have gone through their Intro to the Bible course. And so they've got just a great course selection. You can audit courses online, but certainly you can get your degrees there as well. And then Trinity Western University out of BC, TWU, wonderful friends of ours as well. And they've got a broad selection of marketplace type of preparation for different jobs. And so a long list of degrees that they can grant, but also caring deeply for students' character and for their Christian walk. So check those folks out. We love those 3 partners this year, and grateful for the ways that they have not only invested into the students at their school, but also into youth workers across our country of Canada. All right, well, let's jump into today's conversation that Brittany got to have all about vocation.
Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers. So we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
Hello and welcome back to the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. My name is Brittany. This is my first time hosting an episode, being on an episode here. I'm a summer student with Youth Worker Community, and I have a new friend here. So if you want to introduce yourself, tell them where you're from, what you do, what you're studying, and what your ministry is all about.
Yeah, well, my name is Gustavo. I was born and raised in Brazil, but I came to Canada in 2015 to do my master's at Regent College. And I ended up staying, actually, after my master's degree. And today, I'm still working at Regent, actually. I got a job there. I am the program manager for one of their master's programs. And this is actually my last week because I have started a new PhD program to study theology of work and vocation and work and the relationship between faith and work. And I'll be dedicating more time for this in the next week or so.
Amazing. So we were interested in having this conversation because at Youth Worker Community, we're doing all of these new things, talking about vocation and students heading into whatever career path they feel led to go. And so we've actually created this curriculum that we're hoping to bring to camps and to youth groups. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in getting, your grade 11, 12 students hooked up with this, or you have a camp that would be really interested, we've created this hour-long curriculum to kind of guide students through how to make these decisions about what's next after high school, because we just realized so many students are feeling this pressure, and we're also seeing this massive decline that we might talk about a little later in students entering into vocational ministry within the local church. And so we kind of want to address these things, to talk about them, to just take off this pressure that I'm sure you're really familiar with. But why don't we start if you just unpacking, what does vocation even mean? What is the vocational call? What it might look like? How does this relate to one's occupation and career? So why don't you explain that a little more? Yeah,
no, that's a very good question. I think it's important to define the terms when we're talking about vocation, because vocation can mean anything depending on who you're asking, right? So in terms of historical terms, the word vocation has meant different things for Christians over time, right? So today, I would say that vocation is usually associated with occupation. So what's my vocation? Usually people are saying, well, what's my occupation? What do I do for a living? Or where do I find joy when I'm working? And I don't think it's something that I would fight over, but I think it's important to understand, at least when you're talking to other people, what's their understanding of vocation. My understanding of vocation is a little bit simpler, I guess. I think when I hear the word vocation or calling, because they're kind of the same thing, I would say that for Christians, that's simply the invitation to follow Jesus, right? Jesus invites us to follow him, and that's what I call vocation. Our calling is to follow Jesus. And that can happen anywhere. So in that sense, vocation, the way I understand it, doesn't really have to do with the one thing I must do to serve Jesus. The one work or type of job I have to do to follow Jesus. But actually, it means for me to discern what it means to follow Jesus right now. Right? And I think thinking this way gives us a little bit more freedom to choose, You mentioned the pressure, for example, the pressure that youth usually are feeling when they have to choose what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. It's a lot of pressure, right? So I think it's the pressure to get it right, as if there was this one thing that I have to do to follow Jesus. I think it's not very, very helpful. So in the biblical narrative, I think that's what it means to be called or to be summoned by Jesus, or vocation means, to follow Jesus wherever we go. And I think that's the narrative that we are following. We live by this narrative of following Jesus, not by the narrative of building ourselves up, because I think that's the narrative outside the church and the Christian circles is well, you better choose well, because that's what your life will depend on. So, and then the pressure's on, and then anxiety comes in, and I think that's not very, very helpful.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I mean, in my time spent with students, like, and even being a student not super long ago myself, I really felt that pressure, and it was, I mean, it's cultivated from such a young age. Just like the questions of what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, that's so, yeah, it's everywhere, and it's from a lot of people, like people you don't even know, right? This is the first thing that they ask you, like, hey, like, how are you? What do you do? And it's this thing that almost defines us. And so when you talk about, well, there's actually freedom in that. Like, I think that's actually like a really important thing to communicate to our students.
Yeah.
How do you think we can actually go about like sharing that there's freedom in this? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that our power is limited both ways. So we, as human beings, we don't have the power to make things work 100% of the time, which is frustrating many times, but it's actually good for us because on the other hand, that means that there's no choice I make that will just, mess everything up. So my power is limited both ways. At the same time that I cannot really make things work for me 100% of the time, or for others for 100% of the time, that means that I can make mistakes in my choices as well. So the freedom comes from, being okay with being a creature and having a guide. Jesus is inviting us to follow him wherever we are. So I think the freedom comes for that kind of limited power, I would say.
Yeah, that's so good. And also just like the unification of the call to just follow Jesus. Like, I think that's also encouraging for our students to know. It's like, you're not in this alone.
No.
You're not going down this pathway of this career alone. Like, we're doing ministry everywhere in every aspect of our lives. And whatever, if you're a plumber or if you're helping lead worship within your local church, either of those are equally as meaningful and can contribute to the kingdom of God in unique ways and meaningful ways. But what opportunities do you think we have, like, when we view it that way, when we actually can follow Jesus everywhere?
Yeah.
What opportunities do you think we have when we change that perspective?
Yeah, I can think of three main things. One is that if I have this mindset of following Jesus everywhere, one thing that happens is that I am able to join a process of being shaped by a God who loves me, and he's guiding me in challenging circumstances, for example. So it becomes exciting to know that Jesus is with you wherever you go, because Jesus is helping you through whatever you're doing. So either plumbing or, in a church ministry setting, Jesus is with you. So that kind of, I think it makes life a little bit more adventurous, and less monotonous, actually, because if you have like let's say that we could just draw like a line of our professions or occupations, and then we know everything that's going to happen. I mean, that wouldn't be very exciting. I think it's more exciting if we know that Jesus is with us. The other thing is, we are able, if we have this mindset, we are able to see how unique our circumstances are, because my trajectory is totally different from yours. And everybody, or each one of us, has like their own trajectory, and that is the uniqueness of our environment, or the people that we know, our networks, our conditions, all that. So again, like, it's a little bit more exciting to feel like, well, there's some uniqueness in my calling or my invitation to follow Jesus. And the third thing, I think, it gives us also like the opportunity to join the work that Jesus is doing in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. It's important though, like to remember that this is my interpretation of vocation. We don't bring the kingdom. Okay?
Right.
That's important to put it out there. That's the way I think about this. Jesus is bringing the kingdom, and he invites us to participate. So we can either, choose participate or not participate, but the kingdom will come. That's a fact. Okay. That's said. But we can choose to join him and do whatever, we can to participate in that. And that's exciting in itself, like just thinking that we are participating in the reconciliation of all things to Jesus, which is the message of the gospel, that's exciting too. So I think the mindset of following Jesus wherever we are brings these things. We're shaped by a loving God. We're kind of exploring the uniqueness of our own calling, and we're joining Jesus in what he's doing in the world. So I think that's pretty exciting. That's a good case there.
Yeah. It's the most exciting. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think as we have volunteer youth workers listening to this podcast, as we shape our own understanding of like our own occupation, this actually helps lead our students in their understanding. And it helps us open up these conversations more naturally as we build this own understanding of what we do. Within our youth context, but also in the day-to-day, whatever that might be that you are doing. But we actually get to follow Jesus everywhere. Mm-hmm. And our students notice that when we have this mindset shift, because it's exciting. It's exciting to go to work, wherever that might be. It's exciting to come to youth and to pour into the lives of students. It's exciting to show up on a Sunday morning. It's exciting to do whatever when we have that mindset shift. So I think that's a really cool. Mm-hmm. To kind of shift gears here, like talking about this pressure that students are facing, because it's very real. And when you enter high school, it's like, well, I have to choose the right classes that are going to get me to this path so I can get into these right schools. So I can, like all of these things. And I'm sure people listening even right now are like, yeah, I was asked from when I was 3 years old what I wanted to be when I grew up. Like, that's not an abnormal thing in our culture. So how might we switch this narrative as youth workers, as people like receiving and discipling these students that are so stressed out, that are feeling this pressure from the world to decide, and that so much hinges upon this? How should we actually switch the narrative instead of asking, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, how might we shift our questions and shift the way that we actually interact so it looks very different from the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this question, I don't think it's very helpful, because it kind of connects us or tie us to this idea that vocation is something out there, a goal in the future that must be reached as if there was like one thing I have to do in my life, and it's not very, very helpful, because again, like, it brings the pressure, right? Like it brings the pressure, like, okay, so if there's this one thing that I have to do, I have to find it now and choose right. I would probably change that. If we are interested in knowing, for example, what someone wants to do in the future, we can ask them, what captures your imagination today? What are the things that you feel like, you would like to someday maybe try? Or so it's more like bringing to the present and saying, well, what captures your imagination now about like what you're seeing in the world? I think in a more practical way, I would, if you want to ask that question, you go ahead and ask. But I think a better question would be, what do you think it's the next right step for you right now? What or where do you feel that Jesus is inviting you to go just now? So we kind of take the pressure of a whole life, off the person, and then we're just kind of asking about them right now. What captures your imagination right now? Because the truth is, nobody knows what's going to be, of our lives in 10, 15, 20 years. So that's the truth. So anybody who's kind of selling out there that they can help you to find your ultimate vocation, I have a really difficult time accepting this kind of thing. I don't think that's true, because nobody knows. Vocation in that sense, or my calling as a Christian in the world, makes sense only when I look back, right? We can't really go ahead and in the future and knowing. So I think a better question would be, what captures your imagination right now? And what's your next step that you feel that Jesus is inviting you to take? But regardless of the question, I think it's important that these conversations happen within the church. I think when someone is baptized, for example, or someone joins a community, the church has a commitment to help to disciple that person. So discipleship, in my understanding, will kind of include that conversation about, choosing an occupation, for example, choosing what they have to do. So I think churches and youth workers and people who are like doing the ministry in churches, they should not be afraid of having this conversation. It is messy. It is confusing sometimes, but it's okay. We're all, Jesus got us. Like we don't have to be afraid of having these conversations, but I would probably then take the pressure from the future, eliminate that and ask people about the present, what captures their imagination right now.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. What you touched on is it is a big conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are like, well, I'll leave that to their guidance counselors at school. Like, that's a school thing. Yeah. We'll leave it for them. We'll leave it for their parents who know them best to kind of direct them in that way. But understanding that these conversations are going to happen mm-hmm. and that it's the best place to have them at church. And there are things, students are going to be more open with other people other than their parents or guidance counselors that they don't know super well. Like, they're looking to have this conversation.
That's right.
And I think understanding the element of freedom that we've been talking about from the very beginning, mm-hmm. like, maybe will take the pressure off of youth leaders too. Understanding, like, you can't lead them in the wrong way, mm-hmm, right? Like, mm-hmm, we're actually, when you're here with a genuine heart to disciple, we can actually have real, genuine conversations that are going to be impactful, and trusting that the Lord is going to be the one that directs, and you don't have the pressure to do that. I think that might shift some things for youth workers too, which I think is really important.
No, I think you touched on something that's very important. I think these conversations will happen, if we do it like within the church or not, they will happen. People are looking for the next right step. It's an important thing for people. So maybe it's better that it happens in the church. Why not?
Yeah. No, and I love that. And I just want to recap that for whoever is listening, mm-hmm. that we're asking the questions of, where is God leading you right now? Where do you feel God is leading? Let's just walk through this next step. Mm-hmm. And I think of, just the verse where his word is a lamp unto our feet, right? He's not like showing us everywhere, like, you just where to step next. And I think that is so important to acknowledge, and to to just have that perspective in mind when we're having these conversations that are inevitably going to happen, because mm-hmm. students are so consumed by these questions. And so, they need somewhere to bring it. And so let it be us. Let it be mm-hmm. you who are listening. As we talked about, I kind of mentioned it briefly at the beginning, but we have seen like a significant decrease in youth and young adults that are choosing to enter into vocational ministry. So ministry within the local church as their career and occupation. And obviously not everyone is called to do that. And so, but we're seeing a massive decline, and there is a huge need. Like, we have so many churches coming to us with just job opening after job opening, and they can't fill them. Yeah. So if you're looking, if you're listening and you're looking for a job, please reach out to us, because we have a bunch of job postings. But how do we maybe lead students to understand ministry as a legitimate option for their future vocation? Not to persuade them, because it's not holier than another occupation, but how do we kind of open this door up and just say, hey, like, you don't have to reach all these standards to work in a church. Like, this is an occupation like any other. How might we frame those conversations with our students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that Jesus is still inviting people to work at the church, right? Mm-hmm. I think it is as you said, like, there's no holier vocation than others. So we're not talking about a place where you're going to be choosing the quote unquote right thing to do for Jesus, because as we have been talking about this since the beginning, it is really a matter of following Jesus wherever we are. So I think the first thing is to keep in mind that Jesus is still inviting people to join the church ministry, and that's a good path. And I think it's important to, again, help them to feel free to choose that if they understand that Jesus is inviting them to go. Because one of the things that might prevent people from, joining church ministry is the pressure from the other careers, or the pressure from the world around them saying, well, you gotta make money, you gotta, reach this kind of status, you're gonna do this and do that. So it's important to help youth and people who are choosing their occupations at this time to see which narrative we're living by. Are we living by the narrative of following Jesus and his invitation? Or are we living by the narratives of, like, quote unquote success, right? Like what success means, in and outside of the church terms. That's another thing. Another thing that could be helpful is if someone feels called to join church ministry at this point, we should probably be able to affirm them and encourage them to do so, because even that choice is not forever. We're not asking people to, commit themselves to the church now for the rest of their lives, as we've been talking again. Like, it's really about the next right step. If you're feeling called, if you're hearing this, and if you're feeling called to go to the church and work as a church minister, please give it a shot. If you feel like Jesus is inviting you to do that, I think it's important to pay attention to that, because again, you will have like the opportunity to be shaped by Jesus in that experience. We're not talking necessarily about, the rest of your lives. It could be, but it cannot be as well. So, and I think one of the things that comes to mind is that the importance of the ministry of the church, in Ephesians 4:12, it says that the work of those who are like in the church environment is to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ. So it's a very interesting way of thinking. It's not that you working at the church is doing the work of Jesus. No, you are actually equipping people to go there. So it's again, like, very, very exciting. And I think if we're in that position of like giving people advice about occupations, the church must be a valid way forward. If they feel like Jesus is inviting them to do, they should give it a shot. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? Is that what you're looking for? I'm not sure. I'm rambling here.
That was great. That was really great. And I think just, having the church as a legitimate option, I think it comes from a few different places, but I think one of them is just, opening it up, allowing students to feel the freedom. And I really like what you said just about the next season, because again, this pressure is, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Yeah. I'm choosing what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And that's so heavy and that's so big. And God never intended for anyone to have to wrestle with that question, because it's too big for us. Like, we in our own human capacity can't answer that question. It feels heavy. But when we're just like, okay, if a student comes to you and they're like, I think I might want to work in the church. Okay, let's encourage them. Let's disciple them. Like you talked about earlier, like, let's actually have these tough conversations. Well, why do you want to do that? Inquiring, praying with them, discerning alongside them, and then saying, okay, like, what could this next step look like for you? That might look like going to school. Yeah, to learn more about what that might look like. That could be an internship. They might be in a place where they are able to enter right into work in the church. But actually not just saying, like, I had so many people just say, hey, that's great that you want to work in the church. Have fun. There you go. And the encouragement is nice, but to have people that actually sat down with me and they're like, okay, Brittany, let's figure this out. Like, let's actually walk through this. Not that we know all the answers, but we want to walk alongside you as you discern this and decide this. And this is the same with any occupation.
That's right.
But let's actually encourage our students. Let's actually continue to do life with them. And I know that's hard because youth ministry, it generally ends at grade 12. So my question for you is maybe what might discipleship look like beyond like a youth group setting? Like, how can we actually walk and live out our responsibility as a church to disciple these students beyond the youth program?
Yeah, I think the church is a very interesting setting, because a healthy church would have, all generations represented, right? So I think keeping the intergenerational conversation going is very helpful. Someone who is in the middle of their career or at the end of their career have so much to share, with people who are just choosing or beginning their career right now, in terms of, hey, don't worry, you'll be fine. Affirm people's choices and say, hey, we got you. If you're going through this now, it might be difficult for a moment, but then everything's going to be fine. You don't have to choose at this point. So I think in a way, what it looks like after youth ministry, it's just keep the conversation going and bringing different people to the conversation. I think, how can we look? And this is a question as well, like for youth workers out there. How can we keep the conversation about choosing a career, let's say, or choosing an occupational path going with all the groups of the church? How can we bring different generations or different experiences to the table and talk about it? It could be like that. For example, a youth worker is actually promoting a conversation with the rest of the church, not only the youth leaders. But the youth leaders are actually inviting people more experienced, like people that have different careers, to share their experiences. So I think keep the conversation going is, I think, the bottom line for me. It's just kind of, the church has so many experiences that we can draw from. And sometimes we don't tap into that potential. So keep the conversation going. That's what I would say.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love what you said, just bring in other people. This is an intergenerational, like we're all, and if we're phrasing this question like you did at the beginning, like where's God leading me now? Like what's the next right step? Everybody in your church is probably asking that same question.
That's right.
And I mean, we're daily committing to what we do. And if that's, part of that is likely our occupation. Absolutely. We're daily committing to that, and asking the Lord to reveal what his next step is for us. And it's not just students deciding what am I going to do occupation wise. I mean, you could be a youth worker listening to this and you're struggling with this question. So I hope it's been helpful for you. But just that understanding, I think, is really big, that students are not alone in asking this question. Not alone like in their own groups, but also like in the church as a whole, intergenerationally. Everyone is asking this in one way or another. And so I think that's also really helpful to encourage your students with, and to bring other people in, and they understand that they're not isolated in the feelings that they're feeling, and that people that have so much more experience they don't know where they're going next week.
That's right.
And I think that's a joy in picking up this perspective that you talked about a little earlier, and that we're just invited to do everything in like independence of God and what he's doing, and we're joining in that, whatever that might be. So I think that's a really beautiful perspective.
And I think one thing, just like to close this, is really what we're doing in the church is following Jesus together. So everyone, as you mentioned, everyone is thinking about the next right step, actually, and that unites us, right? So everybody's asking the same question, so we don't have to be afraid of asking the question together as well. So what is the next right step for all of us as a community, as a group, as a youth group, or, just as a follower of Christ? So, yeah.
That is amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me and joining us on this podcast. I'm sure that so many of the people listening to this have taken so much from what you've said and applied it to their own lives and understanding, so we can, act in examples in our attitudes and perspectives to our students, but also as they practically encourage their students as they are wrestling with these big questions and pressures from the world right now. And so if you are listening to this and you're like, wow, my small group, my youth group, my camp, my students need to hear something about this, they need to have a facilitated conversation, I encourage you to go and have it in small group context, in one-on-one, whatever that might be. But if you're looking for something a little bit more formalized, a presentation, we have one. We've created one. So please feel free to reach out to us at connections@youthworker.community, or any of the other ways you can get in contact with us, and we'll hook you up with that. But thank you, Gustavo, and thank you for our listeners. We appreciate the work you're doing in your context with your youth, because you are making an internal difference. So we thank you, and we'll see you next time.
See you.